Well, welcome everyone to the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. I'm Ray, and I'll be reviewing some recent and classic LitRPG audiobooks for you today. Now, before we start the show, I do just want to apologize. I was on vacation last week, and I could not do anything internet-wise, so there was no point to recording, because it just was not going to work, and I was really just kind of nailed down spending time with my family. So there was no way I was getting anything done other than having that happen. So, I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would get home at 8 o'clock at night, and I was exhausted, and I would fall asleep and sleep until 6 a.m. until we went out. My family and I had a really great time. The kids, I should say, really, really enjoyed themselves. They'd never been to a zoo, never been to a museum, never been to a science center, never got to do any of the stuff that we did, since we adopted them, and it was the first time, and it was just amazing to see them enjoying life like a kid should. And that was really a good thing, and it made me feel very happy. And I do apologize for that taking away from the show and the time. But it was just one of those things that I needed to spend time with them and get things caught up. And there's other things that have been happening in my life that are still holding me back a little bit on a lot of things. So I'm trying to get past that right now. But the show is back. And next week, I'm going to do my best to make next week the Dungeon Special. In fact, the Dungeon Special has grown to be so huge, I may have to break it into 2 parts. Because otherwise, I'm going to have like 4 of one person's different books in the reviews. Just one person has written 4 books that are in there because they're dungeon books. And I don't want to make it just about one person. So I may have to split it up, maybe like do part 1 and part 2 the next week, or make it like the following week after, where I do a regular show and then the part 2. There's a lot of material there. I mean, it's huge. I was counting it up, and it's just, there's no way. I don't want to do another 2-hour show. I think that keeping it within a certain timeline works really well. An hour is probably the best fit for this. I know, like, Ramon's shows are not that long. He does like maybe 5-7 minute reviews and so on and so forth. And that's good for his books, but I have a different style. And so I kind of blather on about things, as you can see right now. And so, for me, the longer the review, I think the better you can tell I love the book. And sometimes it's not the case, because sometimes the book just lets me just say something very briefly and get into it. And sometimes I can rant about a book I really hate, just because. Like Gang But Not Conquered, if you saw the Naughty episode, that book really, really upset me. And anything by Luca Petra, I'm just staying away from Luca Petra completely, because it's the same thing. It's right to market, and it has no real redeeming values. So, like I say, for me, I have to pick and choose what I'm going to do. So the Dungeon Special is coming, and I have a lot of people that have sent me things about the Dungeon Special, so I want to get to it, and I've been putting it off, but I think that's the important thing, is to do it right. So there's going to be a big Dungeon Special one way or another. It's probably going to be 2 shows, with a show in between. So just so you know what's going on. So right now, we're going to get started and go to our first book. Well, the first book I'm reviewing today is Adapt, A Touch of Power, Book 2. Narrated by Samara, and I'm going to slaughter this name. Naimi, I cannot do it. I'm sorry. My tongue doesn't let me do it. Written by Jay Boyce, with a book length of 15 hours and 59 minutes.
She pushed open the doors to the art gallery, entering into the darkened area. The only light was coming from the stars through the glass roof of the courtyard. She didn't see anyone else around, as the area was basically one open room, just with square pillars everywhere displaying art on each side. Some had glass shelves for smaller sculptures, and every painting had a glass covering for protection. They were mostly around the edge, probably to protect them from direct sunlight. More sculptures were in the middle. In order to get a better look, she was about to light up her hands when she thought of something. Calling her Felikai over, she held her arm out as they landed. She had them turn around, then concentrated on their tail end. Much like her wind wall at the east gate, she wanted a timed enchantment. When she thought she had it right, she touched each Felikai in turn, and they began emitting different colored sparkles of light as they flew around.
Well, what can I say? Jay Boyce has done it again. She has spun a pretty amazing tale with barely any fighting in it whatsoever. Honestly, There are only a handful of times that lives were taken in this book. But it still dragged me along like I was a dog named Dinky chained to a bumper of a station wagon. And if you're old enough and you remember National Lampoon's Vacation, you know exactly who I'm talking about, and that there's the dog. Okay? It wasn't very nice, and he got... Yeah. Okay, anyway. Boyce just has a very nice, natural way of telling a story that is both compelling and hypnotic. And she has a ton of characters with whom I don't know how she keeps track of them all, but you'll get to know fairly well by the end of the book. I mean, this is one of those books where there is a cast of characters. She has to have a massive checklist to be like, okay, who have I forgotten about? And are they supposed to be in this scene, that scene? Who's supposed to be here? What do they do? I mean, honestly, Samara probably has the harder job trying to keep track of who sounds like what and who and how they talk and what their mannerisms are vocally, because there is a massive, massive cast of characters. So, you know, and here's where I'm going to go into this with this. I think I'm going to just start a new genre, and I'm going to call it LitRPGU, which is, or just like LRU or whatever, but for short. But I think any GameLit or LitRPG that centers on some sort of a school, hence the U for university, shall hence be called LitRPGU, because that is basically a number of books that deal with things that happen exclusively in schools. I'm thinking of like Sufficiently Advanced Magic, for example. Siphon is one of these books where everything happens in the school. You literally go to the class with the character. You get to see what happens in the class, how they learn, how they interact. It's a lot like something to buy that JK lady. I can't remember what it's called. But there's just been a ton of these books. And, you know, like I said, in this example, you literally attend class with Jade. You're right beside her, the MC. You get to go through class, see what she's learning. And sometimes I really wonder how much of a class it is, because there's a lot of talking about stuff. It focuses on what the MC's doing or has relevance to. And then the rest of the class is just kind of, okay, she grabbed some butterflies and she grabbed this or that, or she learned this. So it's not really like teaching lessons like you would get like if you were watching Harry Potter. Sorry, I have a really bad cough. But you get the idea. It's based on a university. And there's been other books like that, especially the one I know I had a rant about that I'm not going to name, that was basically a right-to-market thing. That was a university story as well. And there's a lot of those happening right now. And I think it's a good genre, and I do like the concept. Like, for example, with Sufficiently Advanced Magic, not LitRPG, but it still has that tone of the classes and the school and the college and everything it entails. So I'm just going to just throw that out there. I invented Sheharim last for the naughty episode for instead of saying reverse harem, I'm going to say a Sheharim now because it's her harem. Her harem. Maybe I could do that one. Her harem. But anyway, it's the same thing here. It's going to be LitRPGU for tag anytime I talk about one of these books. Now, this book itself, since I've diverged quite a bit, yeah, I digress a lot, don't I, guys? I'm sorry. The book has a lot going for it from an intensely likable lead. I mean, there's a very likable lead. Jade is fun and outgoing and very, very likable. I mean, I don't know how to put it in a way. She's just one of these characters you really like. If you met a person like this in real life, you would definitely have gravity pull you towards them. It also has a massive supporting cast. In fact, I would say that the rotating cast of characters is what really lends the air of authenticity to the story. If you attend any real college, you will see hundreds of different people a week, if not the same old daily. You know, if you're in a dorm or something like that. But you're going to have a lot of different people that you meet, whether it's in class, going to and from class, having lunch, visiting your dormitory, attending parties. There's going to be millions of people. Well, not millions, but you get the idea. There's going to be a lot of people that you're going to meet in a university, if it's a big university like most universities are. And you're going to have like a rotating cast of people that you just kind of go through. Some you'll see once, some you run into 2 or 3 times, others periodically, some every day. And that's the same thing here. There's just this massive cast, but it has the authenticity of the size of the school. You really say, okay, this is a real place. This is where people really come to learn, and they do well. And it's all right here for Jade to interact with. And that's where it works. It's not the same old people every day. Well, for her, it's kind of getting to be that way, but there's still a huge amount, and she meets a few new people here and there. So I can see that Boyce has really thought her way through the school and how it's run and who populates it. I mean, it's not just like she just said, okay, Jade's going to attend XYZ school and there's going to be 8 people there that she knows. No, there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm pretty impressed with it. There's a lot of work that has gone into the school building, if nothing else. If nothing else, the school building is just massive. The world itself, if I can just digress on that, the world itself is massive and sprawling, and you've only gotten to see a myopic view of what's happening. I mean, like, there's other places in the world that she talks about that she's never seen, she's only heard of, and really they haven't gone beyond the gates of the city that she's in to do anything yet. So there's a whole big wide world out there, but that city is so well developed and is so realistic and lifelike. You get to feel like you know it pretty well. Like, you could probably walk down some of the streets and know where to turn to go to some shops. All right. Now, that isn't to say that the book isn't without its flaws. And there were 2 by my count. 1 minor and 1 major book mistake. Okay. The minor one is easily overlooked. I don't mind it at all. But it bothered me enough that I felt like I had to say something long after Jade performed the action in the book. Now, Jade, as I said before, is very likable. Very, very likable, and she's pretty easygoing and has a positive attitude 99.9% of the time. I think that's what makes her so likable. I mean, she's just got this positive, effervescent attitude. So there's a scene where she completely goes out of character and throws a tantrum in her light class. And I'm not trying to spoil anything, but it's just one weird blip on the radar. As magic that, and I'm talking light class, as in magic that shines, not like it's easy to lift or whatever, or cast. But the actions threw me right out of the book. I was like, that is totally not her. And I literally sat down and said, okay, something is affecting her mind. Someone is hypnotized her, or they're using magic on her to make her react this way, because it is so far afield of who she is. Normally, it just janked me out. I was like, no, that can't be it. But apparently, it was a real event, and there were consequences to it that she rectifies later to a certain extent. But it really made no sense to me for her to do that as a character. None. There are about 100 different ways the Jade that you get to see from book 1 to this book up to that point handle it, and it would have been handled much better. To see her just spaz out in the way that she does, it made no sense whatsoever. It gave no value to the story other than to just say, yep, she's a person. I get that she's a human being, and I get that she's been through a hell of a lot, but all the stuff that's gone before in her life really has not had that big of an effect in her life here. I mean, I'll rephrase that. It has had an effect on her. All right. But it's made her more positive, more giving, more understanding as a character than she should be. Because she's like, nope, you know what? I have laid in the bed my whole life. I've had people wipe my butt. I've had people give me medicine. I've had people, feed me. I don't want to have that. I want to help others. I want to give back, give something of myself, and in return, receive some stuff. Okay, I want to receive friendship and love and respect, things that I really didn't have when I was bedridden. And so that divergence it was a skew that should never have taken place. Now, like I say, it snapped my suspension of disbelief. And like it didn't do anything but make Jade look like a petulant and spoiled brat. And up to that point, she'd appreciated everything that had been done for her or around her. And I think, character-wise, with what happened in the book, and like I said, I'm not going to give it away, but she should have stood up and said, hey, guess what? I already know something about this. Let me show you what I know. Okay, because clearly I know a little bit more about it. And that would have been more in line with her character. And it would have fit, and it wouldn't have changed the story a damn bit. But like I said, this was just kind of like, I'm riding a horse and he threw a shoe. Okay? Now, that's a forgivable offense. The second faux pas, number 2, how do I put this? All I want to say here is if you're building up to an event for an entire freaking book, if you say, I have to go do this. Let's just take St. George and the Dragon, okay? St. George is out riding his horse. He hears a village is being attacked over here by this dragon. St. George says, I have to go to this village and kill this dragon. George goes to the village. The villagers say the dragon moved from here to way over here. Go get him, guy, or we're going to be wiped out. He's eating all of our crops, eating our sheep, our cattle, some of our maidens. Go take care of this dragon. And he never gets to the dragon by the end of the book. Little frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Now, I mean, you keep anticipating things to come. And then to have it not take place, honestly, to me, feels like a bait and switch. I admit, I was a little disappointed. Okay, now I realize this book is not a short book. Let me think. It was what? It was like 15 hours, close to 16. It had plenty of time to get to that point and leave us something else for the next book. Because I know the next book now is going to try to deal with everything that was supposed to have happened in book 2, and it's going to take 17 hours for book 3 to get to that conclusion. And I don't want another 17 hours of building up to this. I really wanted to see that happen. I mean, it's like SWAT. You don't talk about sending SWAT in and then end the book with SWAT outside the door smoking cigarettes, cracking open a cold one, waiting to go into the building. Okay, you just don't do it that way. And that's kind of how this felt. I mean, I will say I was kind of disappointed with that. So it didn't live up to my expectations. So I'm really, really expecting the third book now to have big freaking moments. I mean, battles to heal my wounds. Like I said in the first book and in the second book, there's not a lot of fighting that goes on. It's very minimalistic, and the deaths that occur often are either very distant monsters or just monsters in general and 1 or 2 people in general. Beyond that point, there's not a lot of fighting. And there's a lot of build-up for Jade to be able to become like this mega badass, to be able to cast all kinds of spells and do this and that, and she's learning things and doing things in new and innovative ways, and that's great. I want to see some of that stuff be applied in the field of battle. I really need that. I need to see Jade step up and go to town. And like I said, I don't know how far book 3 is, if it's out yet, because I don't read ebooks. I don't look at books that are out in the Kindle version or hardcover or paperback. I don't, because all I have time to do is listen. I can listen all day, can't read. So I don't care if a book is out already and then I'm talking right now about what I think the book should be. So I don't know. I don't know what's out there right now, but I'm just telling you, the third book, for me, when it gets to audio format, it really has a lot to make up for the ending of the second book. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm bitching overly for no reason. But the build-up to book 3 now starts really close to the beginning of the book. I mean, it's early on. Like, oh, I've got to go do this. I've got to do something about this. This has to be done. And, like I say, it never happens. And I want to backpedal just a little bit. The book is really good. This is a really fun book. I like Jade. Again, I don't know how I would deal with a person like that in real life, because she gets everything she wants. And people like that really irritate me in real life. If somebody does something and it goes wrong and their parents step in and buy them a new Maserati because their Camaro broke down, well, boo-hoo for them. I really don't feel bad for them. And Jade has that kind of sheltered life. She's very sheltered. Anything she needs is given to her, and she has no obstacles to overcome. And that's one of the funny things about the book, is the character of Jade. She, most books, you have to have adversity. You have to have something that says, this character must struggle from here to here to here to here to show growth. And Jade doesn't have that problem. She goes from here to there all by thinking about things and mixing and matching. And that's really interesting and it's fun. And it also shows you don't have to have horrible things happen to your main character every single time that you want to show growth or advancement. You can have a lot of things happen besides that. And that's where I think Jade Boyce really shines here, because she pens a tale that has very little fighting, has no adversity for the main character, and yet I still want to read it. I still want to listen. I want to know what happens next. So the book is really good. It's very powerful. It really sucks me in. And I know I'm complaining about the ending, or the lack of the ending that I wanted, but I have to do that as a reviewer, because I know somebody out there is going to feel way madder about it than me. For that. But again, I want to say the book is well worth the time and investment. It really is. I mean, I have people all the time, like, I'll talk about another book later on in this show, it's in fact, where the ending really pisses me off. And it's a great book. It's a fantastic book. It's an amazing book. But the ending just was not meant to be right there. And I usually can say I'm all for cliffhangers. I'm really for cliffhangers happening. I love cliffhangers. But cliffhangers have a point where they're supposed to occur. They're supposed to stop at a certain point. And this cliffhanger was really not where it should have been. So I'll talk about that later. But anyway, the book itself is an amazing book. The character's great. I love everything about it other than those two things. And the first thing I say is minor. But I want to get that out because if Jade Boyce even listens to this a little bit, I wanted to realize it really, the one thing threw me a little bit, and the other one threw me a lot. Now, Samara, and skipping last name, really impresses me a lot here. With such a huge cast of characters, I never felt like any were recycled, and she just seems to know how to convey an air of joy, which Jade seems to emanate most of the time. Like I said, she's effervescent. She also has the ability to convey a lot of emotion in just a few words. And there are very few narrators that I know that can do that. And I'm just going to say, like, as females, like Andrea Parsnow, Annalise Rennie, this is the quality of people that she's there with. Because there's a lot of emotion in just a few words. Not an easy task. She also flips genders pretty easily. She can go from being a guy to a girl and back again, and you really aren't thrown off that much at all. I mean, you're like, yep, that's a guy, and that's a girl, and you got it. So she adds a lot to the story, and I think she really, really embodies the spirit of Jade. So now you're going to say, what's the final score? Because you just had like a big rant over something. Well, my final score is 8.3 stars. Wow! I really liked the book. I mean, I can't say that enough. But the one event was skipped out, really deflated my enthusiasm. So I did shave off some points. I mean, this could have been a much higher story had I gotten what I expected. This would have been much bigger, believe me. But my enthusiasm was crushed. It was just crushed. And again, not to spoil the big finale, but everything pretty much went the way I expected it to. Jade really does, she needs some solid setbacks. She needs losses. Because as much as I just said that Jade Boyce can show that you don't have to have those things, now I really need to see how she'll react to actually having lost or not succeeded or not having been strong enough or not having been smart enough to deal with something. I want to see her fail, and I wanted to see her have losses that are, compensatory to all her greatness. So as brilliant as she is here, she needs to do something really stupid to learn from that. And that means, if it means like somebody dying, then it means somebody dying. So, there's a lot of things I need to see in this book 3. Because for her, failure is never an option. It never seems to occur. Like I say, there's a scene in the book where she's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. We've got 85 people here to help, but I'm sweating bullets because and you're in the thing you're saying, she's going to do it. So it's just a matter of hearing about how it's going to occur. And that's fine. That really is fine because I know that's the character and I know that's the way that Jade Boyce writes. I really hope that there's some things negative in Jade's life in the future, which is a horrible thing to say. But if I'm looking at it as a listener or a reader, there really needs to be something to just kind of knock her on her butt a little bit because I want to see how she gets up and dust herself off. I want to see her do that. I want to see her show how strong she really is by, wiping the blood from her eyes, by putting the armor back on and standing up and fighting whatever way she can. That is what I need to see. She's learning all kinds of different skills and powers. I want to see how she does with those things when she's actually put to a test. And that's the important thing. So anyway, 8.3 stars. This is still an amazingly good book. Like I said, it would have been really close, much closer to the higher number had it not been for those two little things that occurred. So I highly recommend this book. Read it if you haven't already. All right, so the next book is Heir Today, Pawn Tomorrow, which is part of the Good Guy series. This is book 2 by Eric Ugland. And I got to tell you right now, I really like this series a lot. Narrated by Neil Helligers. I've really come to appreciate his work as well. Book length of 6 hours and 33 minutes.
What is him? A moment passed, and Nikolai looked at Cleve. Cleve looked at me. I looked at Cleve. Finally, I pulled my character sheet, which is where I saw how many points I still needed to distribute. Montana, level 10 nothing. Traits, race, fallen. Height 6'3", weight 280 pounds. Eye color hazel, hair color blonde. Renown 0, no one even knows you exist. Statistics, HP 236, Stam not applicable, MP 182. Armor plus 23, chainmail. Active effects none. Attributes, Strength 55, Agility 17, Dexterity 19, Constitution 52, Wisdom 13, Intelligence 13, Charisma 19, Luck 27.
All right, so I really praised the hell out of this book 1 with my first review. And there I stated how much this book series feels like a serialized TV show that had a solid continuity, and I totally stand by that assessment. I could easily see this playing out on Amazon or Netflix or even Hulu or Disney or whatever other streaming billion services that are out there. But you would love it every second of it if that was the case. My preference, of course, would be to do Amazon or Netflix, but wherever it goes, this is meant to be a TV show. This is like Game of Thrones epic style storytelling in a way that is fun and silly and crazy. And it works so very, very well. I mean, it's not Game of Thrones mentality. Very clearly, it's not that way. But it is very much a great story, and it is serialized. And that's one of those things, like, what I miss from, like, I wish the X-Files had kind of been that way through season 1 and had stayed that route rather than being like the Monster of the Week. This is not like a Monster of the Week or a Villain of the Week kind of book series. It's very much all happening as it should play out in a regular story. If you were just watching this from afar, it's just the one guy's life being told. Now, book 2 picks up maybe about 1 second after book 1 finishes. In fact, it sort of relieves. It Smeals great. Smeals, who the hell is this guy? If you know Rocky. Anyway, it relives the last 3 minutes of book 1 just to kind of give you an even footing. So you start off, it pretty much picks up 3 minutes towards the end and then just runs off with it. The MC, the main character, Montana, has some really hard decisions to make in this book and somehow tried to survive. And I don't know which is really even harder for him, because the decisions are ones that he does not want to make. There are options he does not want to choose, and the survival stuff is pretty hardcore as well. And he kind of goes through it, and I don't want to say this because, like, I know he gets bashed for being like this brainless lout. And Montana is not brainless. He's not dumb. He's not stupid. He's you and me. I mean, this is really, if you or I got thrown into a portalized video game style world, this would be how we would react, because no matter how many video games you've played and how well you think, oh, I could min-max my character, or I would tweak this and tweak that, and I'd build up this and build up that, The reality of it is you're just a person, and you'd be in some extreme circumstances. You'd be in over your head. You'd have no clue what was going on in reality, and your reactions would reflect your inability to kind of process everything that was happening all at once, even after you've been there for a little while. I mean, you know, there's a reason why people go to war and they get shell shocked. I think that would be the same thing here. There would be extreme shell shock. If I want to go back to World War I don't like that PTSD stuff, but I like shell shock. There would be extreme shell shock people going into these worlds, because no matter how much they thought they were ready for it, it would just not be the case. And, you know, like I said, I keep hearing that Montana's a little low in the intelligence score, but he, to me, is just a regular dude that has been thrown into extraordinary circumstances, and he's dealing with it as best he can in the most, I don't know, the most forward way that he possibly could. I don't know how to put it any other way. He pretty much just does things as he thinks of them, which is how I would do things, how you would do things, I think. So he's not stupid by any means. I think he's just kind of rolling with it as best he can. And I think that as the series progresses, he's going to get a little bit better at anticipating things and dealing with people and dealing with circumstances a little bit better than what he has up to this point. But it's very real, and I have to say it's very believable and authentic in its presentation. So, you know, for anybody that thinks he's an idiot, I think you need to reassess. I really do. He has to deal with the concept of, like, let's just say, for example, adoption, whether he wants to become royal. He's dodging death, and he still has to just be himself. I mean, he's given some tasks that really seem insurmountable. One plus of the whole story is that all the crunch seems to have lessened a little bit in comparison to book one, which is really weird for me to say that, because, like, you know, for example, I know Ramon is all about the crunch. The crispier, the better for him. Me, I can take it or leave it. It's great in some aspects and then others not. Book one, it was really like every 5 minutes, it felt like there were stats and stuff coming up. This one kind of trims it back to a more manageable level to me, but it still remains enough crunch that you'll be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Okay? So, you know, it's there. It's there, and, you know, you won't have a complaint, but it's not as overwhelming as it felt in book one. Here, it's more manageable, and I think it actually gets pulled back a little bit more in book three. I don't want to go too much into that. But book three, it's the same thing. It's pulled back to a much more enjoyable level than here. Not that it's not enjoyable, but for me, I don't like to have all the stats and stuff rolling into my way every 10 minutes, being given, like, character updates and that sort of stuff. The real draw of the tale is Montana himself, and how he completely deals with all the craziness that suddenly fills his life. For example, a couple of man-otter beastkin, you know, kind of get sworn in as his own vassals. He's now, you know, got to deal with having them as part of his tribe, or whatever you want to call it, his group, his team. He's got to keep them alive as well as himself, keep them out of trouble. And, you know, and he gets himself into trouble more than anybody, much to the chagrin of his party. Montana's one of these guys that's kind of like, well, I'll go over here and investigate this just to save everybody else the hassle. And everybody else is like, why are you going off alone and doing things on your own when it makes us get into danger because you're doing things you might dredge up Cthulhu for all we know. And, you know, we're all dead because you were poking your nose where it shouldn't have been, or we could have been there to help you and stopped you from doing this sort of stuff. So there's that aspect of it as well. And that's where I say he's incredibly likable, and I enjoy spending time with him. And I like the doofiness with which he proceeds, because I'm that way. Like I say, my wife will tell you I'm autistic because I am oblivious to certain aspects of the world, just completely oblivious to them. I go through life, it's a social thing. It really is. Socially, I'm horrible with socially understanding things. I've worked many years to socialize myself. And sometimes I say to myself, DD, you know, what would Dexter do? Because Dexter was one of these characters, you know, Dexter, the serial killer, who didn't understand people, and he struggled to emulate them. And I've had to deal with that in my whole life, was like understanding why people do certain things and how things happen. And so for me, I'll see somebody crying, oh, do you have some sort of allergy today or something? No, I'm at a funeral and I'm upset. Oh, okay. You know, stupid me. That sort of stuff. Okay, that's just the way my mind is. I don't connect like I should. And so I see Montana doing the same thing. He doesn't have connections that need to be made automatically, XYZ. On paper, I'm great. I can do things on paper all day. In person, I fits out. I just fits. So I really think the story is progressing. It's got a good arc to it. It's not going too fast. It's not going too slow. I don't feel like I'm getting railroaded into, getting like these little chunks of story. I think the stories interlock very neatly. And, I'm, like I said before, I'm one of these people that I really prefer a 7 or 8 or 9 hour book as opposed to a 14 or a 17 hour novel. And it used to be the other way around. But when it takes, an audiobook takes 24 hours to listen to, I could probably read a 24-hour listening book in probably 5 or 6 hours. I'm a voracious reader. I used to be able to read really quickly. I don't know how I would do now because it's been a couple years since I've actually sat down to read an actual book. And nowadays, when I read stuff, I kind of skim, paperwork and stuff like that because I'm not reading everything in depth. I'm looking for PowerPoints, that I had to focus on and things like that. So it's not quite the same thing. But I mean, I could probably read a 24-hour read book out loud in about 6 hours, if less. Okay. So getting to have to go through that can be a bit overwhelming. And actually, sometimes I kind of hold off on books that are that long just because it's going to take away from like 5 other books I could read that are half the length. And I don't want to do that to that book as opposed to the other books. So I like the book lengths on these novels. I think they're really perfect. Again, it makes it feel episodic and it makes it feel like part of a series rather than one long honking book. Like, if you want to know the truth of it, like the longest book I've ever read was the Sword of Shannara. And if you know the book is this thick in hardcover. And I read like 900 pages and it was still that thick to go. And it was so boring to me. I actually had to stop. I put the book away and it was years. And I mean years and years and years after the fact. And I won't even go into it now how long it was before I went back and got the book and finished it. And I forced myself to go through it because it was not as good as the Elfstones. And I got the Elfstones first and read that. And the book, the Elfstones, that big. And the Elfstones was succinct and it was amazing. And it was, all the excess was trimmed away in that book. It was just amazing and fantastic. And that's what I see here. There's a lot of stuff I could get for a 17-hour book. I think that, this book could easily be blown up and fill up more hours for listening. But it's not. It's trimmed back and only the necessary items are there to keep it simple. That's the nice thing about the story. It's very simplistic. It's not overly thought out. It's not overwrought. And it's so smooth in how it goes. I just think it works perfectly for the character and for the world that you're in. Like I say, it just works really well for me. Neil Helligers does one Helligers of a job in this book, in the series in general. Okay, I honestly don't believe he's done anything better. Now, I could be wrong on that, but he is at the top of his game here, no question. And he sells the story like he's getting all the profits. I've heard carnival barkers that didn't have half the heart or, a coercive skill to keep you listening here like Neil does. Unlike the barkers, he's not selling a bucket of crap, though. He has some serious goods, and you're going to thank him for his efforts. Seriously, Helligers really romps and has fun with the book, and he plays Montana like Conan's with the brains of Chandler Bing. Conan was not known for his wit, but Montana is just that snarky, sarcastic kind of way he goes. I just think that he plays him so well. And, and I always say, like, well, this character feels like they embody, like, I said, Samara embodies Jade in the book Adapt in Siphon. They really do. She does really well. And there's other characters I'll say, like, to me, Jeff Hayes is Quantum Hughes. If you read Feedback Loop, that chronicle, the whole series, Hayes is totally Quantum Hughes. There's nobody else who could play Quantum Hughes. Nobody. Just could not be done. And there's very rare times that I'll say there's a connection between a narrator and a character. And I'll say that in this case, I feel like Helligers really connects with Montana because he has fun with it. He's lively. He's enjoyable. And I just really think that he works perfectly with this material. The series has quickly grown to be one of my favorites. I sincerely listened to books 1 through 3, one right after the other, almost all the way through in each listening. Like, I almost did not stop between book 1 and the end, book 2 and the end, and book 3 and the end. Only time I did is if I had to go do something or had to answer a phone or talk to somebody, but I was right back to it. So that tells you how much I enjoyed these stories. I just wanted to hear more. And when I got to the end of book 3 and there wasn't a book 4 for me not happy, I was very sad. I can't speak more highly of this series than I already have, as you can clearly see. It fits right into my sweet spot, running under 8 hours, and is masterfully told, excellently narrated, good runtime, it's humorous, well-crafted story, all combined for this massive blast of one hell of a ride. Okay, it's just fun from start to finish. I give this 8.3 stars, but the series as a whole, and I can't interconnect them all, make this big train, it's much higher for me. I mean, honestly, I would probably say the series like an 8.8 for me, once you've read all the books, because it's just fantastic fun, non-stop, and it just sucks you in. It's like a mini black hole that will not let you out of its event horizon. You can't get away from it once you get in. It's a perfect blend. It cuts a fine line between campy and serious, and I just think that Ugland is a master at his craft, and he's telling a story that he is meant to tell. Yeah, next up, Viridian Gate Online Firebrand, a LitRPG adventure novel, which is part of the Firebrand series, Book 1, written by J.D. Astra and James Hunter, narrated by Emily Wu Zeller, with a book length of 10 hours and 17 minutes.
I hit the ground, and the wind left my lungs. I choked for air and grasped at my chest. My eyes stung every time I tried to open them, but I could see in the darkness as debuff notifications appeared. Debuff added. Stunned. You have sustained a stunning blow. Attack damage minus 15%. Stamina regeneration reduced by 30%. Movement speed reduced by 35%. Duration 1 minute. Broken nose. Your nose has been broken. Take 1 point of damage per sec and reduce visibility by 25%. Duration 3 minutes or until a potion is consumed. Damn it! Why did I roll a caster? Why was I so damn squish? There was more shouting and a swift kick to my ribs, then metal on metal and a deep cry of agony.
Now, here's a little story I got to tell about a gal named Abby you know so well. It started way back in VGO's prehistory when she learned a little bit about Osmar's treachery. That's right. Abby, Grimjack's love interest in VGO, has a book of her own. Blew my mind. That's right. I have to say, I've always been, this is the truth. Now, if I'm going to come clean, I've always been a little leery of one writer taking over another writer's character. I think that sometimes it can work and other times not so much. For example, I think Elsprague de Camp, I never get that right. Elsprague de Camp did a great job portraying Robert E. Howard's Conan, the Barbarian. But Robert Jordan, not so much. Yeah, I know Jordan has his own acclaimed series, the whole Wheel of Crime or Time or something. But I think his rendition of the Sumerian Suckmarians, okay, it just sucks. He cannot write a Conan story to save Conan's life. Honestly, I mean, I have read some bad Conan stories by authors who are not nearly as talented or well-known, and Jordan cannot do a good Conan story. I'm sorry, he just cannot. Personal preference, acclaimed series, but just, man, you get my point. I think at this point,
Here is some TV show, Southern Jump.
My phone's jumping in at me. I think that every great writer who has tons of material to research, okay, and work from somebody else may not quite succeed in the way you would expect. Like I say, I might feel I know Conan really, really, really well and be able to write a good Conan story. But, my thought process is what Conan does and how he acts and how he thinks may not come across to the other readers. And they'll be like, who the hell is this guy thinking he knows how to write Conan? So when JD delves into the works with here, I suspect a guiding hand from Hunter, she does so with little else. I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot of Abby history outside of the main series of VGO up till this point. I mean, she did write the one story in the anthology, but that's it. So that was kind of her thing in the first place. So she takes this character and makes Abby her own, which is really hard. I have to give her a lot of credit. It's a rough thing to do. And after several novels, you kind of get a real taste for what a character's like. And I think, I might know how Cutter, like, for example, would react in a situation, but I'll never be able to handle Cutter the way that Hunter could. So I'm going to give hats off to Astra for that power play, because she pulls off, like, total knowledge of Abby and how she works magnificently. I mean, I really think that she is speaking with the same voice that Hunter did when he was writing Abby all by himself. Now, not to say that he's not using Abby for anything anymore, but Abby is still talking, and it's just through JD Astra's voice now, and it works. It really does. Now, when I first heard the title, my first thought was of DC Comics' Firebrand, which is a certain little flame-based superheroine that hung out with the All-Star Squadron. Fantastic series. By the way, both characters are redheads, and they deal with fire like I do ice cream and cookies in large volumes and periodically get out of control. But Abby isn't some one-dimensional C-list comic book character like DC's Firebrand. And I have to say that the female version is actually like a second or third iteration of the Firebrand person. There was another Firebrand before her who was a guy that wore a red mask and so on and so forth. But not to get into, I'm digressing. Abby is fully formed and developed and can truly, and Astra proves here, carry a series all on her own. And this points to Astra, who really feels Abby with some life all unto herself. And she shows that Abby can be just as interesting as Grimjack. Because to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of firecasters. Like when I'm reading a story and one of the characters goes, you have a choice of spells, and you're like, fireball, I'll do fire, I'm going to do this. It is so overdone, I get bored with firecasters. I mean, I don't care what kind of fire they sling. Firecasters are not exciting for me. They're not like, oh yeah, here they come. Like Marvel's Human Torch doesn't do anything for me like it did when I was a kid. Whether it was, the android or it was Johnny Storm. It just doesn't do anything for me anymore because it's not all that impressive. And I like to have lesser known powers brought to the fore. Like you very rarely ever see wind magic or, earth magic or whatever being used to the extent that they should or could. And that's the case here, where I say, okay, Abby's a firecaster. Well, Abby actually employs her fires in pretty cool ways. So I like that Astra shows that she can be pretty cool. And it's not just, oh, here's a fire spell here and there. It's a lot more than that. Now, the book takes place a bit before Grimjack goes off and snags that seal that lets him do the few things that few characters can, with the Imperial stuff. So it's an interesting alternative POV on how things kind of lead up to that point. Only it's for Abby and her companion. And I have to say that even though I knew a few certain things going right into this, such as I know Abby is going to be in no danger to die, just as I know in book 1 in VGO, Grimjack is not going to die, okay? Like a main character in MC, it's very rare that it does happen where they kill the main character off. And I'm thinking like Game of Thrones or that Ned Stark gets his head cut off. It's because you don't see it, and Ned was not really the lead of the series. He was only the lead of the book. The series had other things. So in that case, it can come as a shock. But here, Abby is in later stories, so she's not going to die no matter what. Just like Grimjack is going to be the backbone of the VGO universe. He's not going to die at any point. So you're never going to really have that concern as much as you should with characters that you aren't familiar with in other instances. Like if this was a new character and there were 2 or 3 of them in there, you might be surprised to see one of them die. Here, not so much. So going into it, I knew Abby wasn't going to have anything negative affect her in some serious, long-lasting way. So with that in mind, I went into it thinking like that and not being like, okay, well, I know this isn't going to happen and this isn't going to happen, and this isn't going to happen, so what can I be excited about? I kind of let it be the prequel that showed me what brought Grimjack's world into being and how Abby, took a hand in bringing him in, how Abby took a hand in making this happen and that happen, and everything that was going on while he was off doing his thing, even after he got into the world. So it's pretty cool to see that occur. Now, it does end, I think, right around the point where he gets the Imperial Seal doohickey. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how, but what point it is for the story. But it does not feel like a backstory fill-in as much as it does showing you, this is Abby. This is telling you who Abby is, where she comes from, who she is, how she thinks, why she does what she does. So it's more like a character builder than it is a filler. And like I said before, you'll probably hear me say Dragonlance in this episode a dozen times. Dragonlance books 1 through 6 are amazing. Everything that comes out after it is total crap. And why? Because it's all filler. Whether it's the short stories that were collected for this, that, the other thing, or it was the novels, it's all filler. They have pre-Cataclysm, they have post-Cataclysm, they have the Dragons of Summer Flame, which is crap. Everything about that stuff is just filler. And when I read it, I think this is just made up, like Legend of Huma. Okay? All of the whole Legend of Huma in Dragonlance was made up to be this huge, incredible story. And when you get to read a story, is it over? Really? I could have cared less about what happened. Really, it was that bad. It was just that bad. And I'm not trying to knock anybody for writing it. It's very hard to make an exciting story when you know what's going to happen already and when it's been built up. If you ever had a friend that said, oh man, you've got to go see this movie. This is the most amazing movie you're ever going to see. The special effects, the characters, the actors, the whole thing. It's amazing. And you go there and like, this is Alien 3. What are you talking about? That is what you usually get in those kind of books. This is not a filler novel by any stretch of the imagination, at least in my eyes. And I'm not blowing smoke, and I am a big fan of VGO, very clearly. I make no qualms about it. I have been a fan of VGO since book 1. I have been right there cheering them on, saying fantastic story, fantastic characters. I love the world. This is an amazing series. I've said it since day 1, and if I have any kind of part of it whatsoever, I'm so proud of myself for being able to do that. Because, like I said, I got into that anthology, and I was just amazed that I could become a part of a world that has just given me so much. And I think that's the same thing Astra feels. J.D. Astra has such a love for the character of Abby. It totally shines through. And like I say, this is not a filler novel. This is a character novel. This is showing you who Abby is, what she is like, why she does the things she does, why she did what she did, how she did what she did, and what her thought processes were through the whole thing. And you kind of come to understand her a lot better as you go back. And if you look at the series later from those points, you can see, okay, this is Abby, and this is what she's like. And I think it actually fleshes her out way more than what we've gotten. And as much as I say, Cutter's my favorite character of the VGS series. I love him way more than Grimjack or Abby or any other characters, just because I always think of Cutter as being like the Mick Jagger of the story. Like when the narrator goes and gives him his voice, I just see Mick Jagger's swagger and the attitude and the pomp and all that. And there's just something about that. And he's a thief. So I'm drawn to thief and bard characters for some bizarre reason. I love them immensely. And so Cutter, for me, is the guy that I think really is who I would have loved to have seen get his own book. But on the same side, other side of the coin, I also think of Family Guy and how they did the Cleveland show. And why did they do Quagmire? Quagmire was much more popular than Cleveland. And the reason being is you could only do so much with Quagmire for so long before it got boring. And it's the same thing with Cutter. Cutter can only strut and swagger for so long before he becomes a pompous ass. And Abby has a lot more going for her emotionally, mentally than Cutter. And I don't want to say Cutter's two-dimensional, but his characterization in the book does not lend to a whole series based on Cutter. As much as I wish you could, it would be damn hard to do it. You know, and like reading the short story about how he became the gentleman of Rowan Heath, it was great. But, at the same time, I can go back and say, I don't see that going into the book lengths that Hunter likes to go into for story, because Cutter just can't carry it, whereas Abby can, and Astra makes it very, very obvious and apparent what is so good about Abby. And I don't want to go into the whole story. I mean, it's like I said, it's pretty easy to understand. It just kind of fills in the stuff that happens prior to the one part of the first book. But it's important things. It really is. So it helped me understand VGO much better. And like I say, it starts pre-apocalypse and it follows her into the game. So we become more aware of the world and what led up to its creation, how it got made. So like I say, it works. It's a fun romp that sort of look back at the beginning. It's kind of a reflection. You can kind of look back into the past and say, okay, I saw what happened there. Now what? So, and again, I don't know what happens in the other books. I'm only on book 1 of the audio. And I know book 3 just came out for the series itself. So I don't know what happens, but I'd like to see Abby kind of get away from Grimjack in the next book completely, but like in a more concurrent timeline, or as close as possible to do that. So the series doesn't feel like a prequel that tries to play catch up to the main series. I think that is the only pitfall that I can imagine happening, in that it's always playing catch up to what's happening in the other story. I think that Abby needs to get out and say, okay, here's where Grimjack is at now, and this is what Abby's doing. And there are parts where she's away from Grimjack, and I know that's probably where they're going to fill in, but I think she needs to step out and be completely free of the other events happening so that you can kind of get to see her in all of her glory and not feel like it's just kind of a precursor to what has come in the last 6-7 books. So that's my only concern. Emily Wu Zeller, whom I actually recognize from a book named Minimum Wage Magic, which is part of the Detroit Free Zone series. And it's a good series. It's funny. It's funny in a lot of places, but it also isn't slow and draggy. It has a breakneck pace that made me realize how good of a narrator she is. FYI, she has done some hella lot of narrating, just so you know that. And I completely credit Shadow Alley for bringing new blood into their LitRPG books, just like I did with Mountaindale with Axe Druid and bringing in their guy. I think that, Shadow Alley really found somebody special here to vocalize. If you don't want to use the standards, and again, I'm not trying to say, skip the standards, because I love the standards that we have. But if you're looking for somebody new, Emily is a great person to go to. Like I said, if you've read Minimum Wage Magic, or I should say listen to it, you'll know how good she really is. I think she fits right in as Abby. And again, this is only book 1, so I can't say she embodies the character like I probably will in a couple other places. But I think she does a really good job as Abby. And probably by about book 3, I'll say, oh yeah, she is totally Abby in my mind now. So when I hear the other guy reading the Abby parts in the main series, I'll be like, that ain't Abby no more. Yep. That ain't her. That ain't her. Nope. You're trying to trick me. But, she needs to work more in this genre, I think. I think that Emily Wu Zeller does a really nice job. And again, that's one of those things where I say it a lot, but narration is not easy. So if it's mediocre, I'm going to tell you it's mediocre. And if they do a good job, I'm going to tell you they do a good job. And Zeller really does do a great job here. And she's got a whole lot of books behind her to prove just how good of a narrator she really is. So, give her a chance because she does fantastic. The final score is 8.2 stars. I did enjoy it a lot. The narration's a great matchup. My only issue is I really didn't have a lot of tension because I know that no matter what, Abby would be okay. And like I say, that's the only thing it really took away from the story. I would have probably said if I didn't know all the other stuff that was happening. I'd probably said 8.5, 8.4, somewhere in that ballpark. But when I don't have any tension of any concern of anything happening to Abby, I got to pull back a little bit because there's no idea what's going to happen. And it's kind of like the same thing like with VGO. If I'm going to stay in the VGO universe, it's like with the Death Heads quest. The first Death Heads quest was really fun. I enjoyed it. The second one, I was kind of like, I've seen this before, and I kind of know how it's going to play out. This is going to kick in at just the wrong moment, and it's going to happen at the wrong time, and so on and so forth, and it's going to be a struggle. So it wasn't as good for me the second time around. So, that kind of took away some points for me reading-wise as well with those books. Whereas here, just knowing that it's like I say, it's a precursor. So, it's just like, I'll go back to Dragonlance. When Flint gets captured by the Gully Dwarves and Flint the King, he's not going to die and nothing bad's going to happen to him, really. Even though in the story, the main story, he'll talk about the horrible time that he had, he's not going to have anything so horrible that he can't make it to the main series. So it took away from your enjoyment just a little bit as things go. So, to me, it's better served to do something afterwards with the characters on their own. So when you have a prequel like that, as much as I say I enjoyed it, and I think it was much more about the character than it was about the story, which is much more important because this is meant to increase the enjoyment of the characters themselves. That's what it's about, because the story is already told. So you can't make it about the story. You've got to make it about the characters. And J.D. Astra really does that. So kudos to her. And that's why it's only 8.2. I can't go higher just because, you knew what was coming, even though it hasn't happened yet. So next up, I'm going to do Into the Light, Axe Druid, Book 1. Written by Christopher Johns, narrated by B.J. Harrison. The series is the Axe Druid, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I just did. With a book length of 16 hours and 18 minutes.
He's the gaming guru I never knew I needed. He stayed true to himself and kept his avatar close to his real height of 5'6". Yosuke, fool? He joked and strutted imperiously. Jake and Evan are here too. As he said their names, I looked over, and sure enough, the other two were standing there with huge grins. Hey, broski, said the tall, lanky elf, who looked like he had hypothermia. I recognized his voice and mannerisms as my buddy, Jake. Long time no see. This just kept getting more and more unreal. I had just seen them earlier. The elf stepped forward, and we clasped hands. His pale blue skin was wrapped in black animal fur, with traces of white streaking through, hanging out of tan breeches. He had a bow slung over one shoulder and a quiver at his hip. Long, black hair graced the top of his head, with the sides cleanly shaven.
Now, I really don't know what I was expecting with this book, but whatever it was, wasn't what I got. Okay, let's put it like this. I have a few things to say about this book, first and foremost. I really enjoyed this tale. So what I am about to say is not a criticism or meant to be detrimental to the story or Chris Johns, but I really wish he had made this into a group book rather than focusing it on the Druid MC. You want to know why? As fun as Ezekiel was, here's the thing. There were times that I wanted to follow the other characters as much as I wanted to stick with MC Ezekiel. I honestly think this book really had a feel to me as I listened that it could have been as epic as Dragonlance in some ways. Now, if you know me at all, my favorite fantasy series of all time is the Dragonlance Saga, books 1 through 6. Everything else is trash that comes after it. I don't even ignore it. I don't care if it's canon, not canon, if it's whatever. It's all junk. I've read it all, and it's all junk. I supported them because it was Dragonlance, but books 1 through 6, the best series of fantasy novels ever written, in my opinion. And that outdoes Tolkien. I know Tolkien is great, but Tolkien just had his own style of things. The characters that were in those books, the Dragonlance books, were incredible. And that's the thing where I would say the side characters, the back characters, the group characters, they each really had different abilities. I wanted to see, and personalities too, amplified. I wanted to know more about each of them. I would have followed them anywhere. Balmer and Yosekai, they were two of my faves. I'm trying to think of Yosekai there. But like I said, each is unique and fun and interesting in their own way. And I lament the possibility since the story was told in first person. Now, again, Ezekiel's fine, and I really like the book. And what's funny is, and I'll just be frank with you guys as I do this, I never, ever, ever, ever look at other reviews or listen to reviews from anybody until after I've got this stuff all kind of penned out what I want to say. So here's, I'll say, here's what I want to say, here's what I want to do, and then I kind of flesh it in after I've done the videos. I'll say, here's this, and go with that. So sometimes I don't even change it, because in the video I just say something and I digress a little bit. But anyway, I pretty much have written down what I want to say before I ever sit down to record. And I never look at reviews until after I've gotten to that point, and usually it's not until after I record. But I really got curious. I wanted to see what Ramon had said. And it surprised me because he didn't like the side characters at all. He kind of found them to be one-dimensional. Whereas like I said, for me, it was the opposite. So it just shows you that we each have our own perspective on things. Balmer was just more fun for me than Ezekiel was. Balmer just appearing and doing his thing and disappearing, and Yosekai being Yosekai. I loved it. So it's just funny, and that's why I don't do it, because I don't want to get tainted. I don't want to get tainted by somebody else's thoughts or their thought processes or their ideas or concepts. I try to keep everything right here with me doing it. And I just wanted to see what was said. And that's where I say it's just funny, because I wanted the book to be the group, and that wasn't the way that it came across, with them. So, that said, damn, this book is a fun ride. That's all I can say. The book mixes portal fantasy with lit RPG splendidly. Now, what was refreshing was I didn't hear the characters struggling to go back home. Yeah, I did hear them say, hey, I miss my wife, I miss my kid, I miss my girlfriend, I miss my dog. Whatever it was going to be they were lamenting the loss of or the absence of, they did say that. But the nice thing is that each character recognized that there was a reason why they were there. They signed up for it, so to speak, and that they couldn't go home, because if they do, then they're damning their world to destruction just as much as every other world in the universe or multiverse, or however you want to look at it. So they really have no choice but to stay. They're almost like soldiers who signed up for a job. Like, let's just say like they signed up to go fight Hitler, and they know they can't go home until Hitler has been stopped. And that's the way it feels. Like they're out to do this no matter what. So this is kind of like Inglourious Bastards in one aspect of things. Because these guys are doing their thing and doing their best, and they're not going to go home until that job is done. And I really, really appreciated that, because most times portal fantasies or, stuck in games, everybody struggles to go home. That's the big thing. And I always wonder, like, why are you struggling to go home? You can either get there when you get to be strong enough, or you're stuck there, so just accept it, because you're never going to go back. And that sounds like a defeatist attitude, but I'm more of a realist, and if they say, look, there's just no way in hell you can ever get back, I guess I'm never going to get back. Doesn't mean I'm not going to try, but it's not going to be my only goal. My only goal would be to survive, and then to get stronger, and then maybe find a way out later. Those are the priorities in my gaming and other world kind of things. So it was nice not to have that repeated over and over and over and over again. Obviously, they missed their loved ones, but they knew that those lives were endangered. So they stayed focused. They stayed very focused. And the funny thing is as the book goes on, it really will feel to you, because it felt like that to me, that the characters all become kind of super OP. And it never failed to grab a new skill, spell, trick, craft item, whatever it's going to be. Whenever they went somewhere new, or met somebody new, or fell into a hole, every time that they did something, there was an opportunity for them to grow stronger from it. And I like that a lot. But regardless of the fact, they don't come across as being able to whip war's butt, or even the people that work for war. War's the big main bad guy, by the way. He's the threat to both worlds. They use teamwork and intelligence to achieve the impossible. That's the teamwork, like I talked about from the book. And it's their closeness and camaraderie that drew me into the story more than anything. Like Ezekiel is one of these characters. It reminds me a lot of, like I said, Jade in the Adapt book. And just because these are Mountain Dale Press books doesn't mean they're the same thing at all. But every time Ezekiel goes somewhere, he makes a friend. He befriends the unfriendable. He applies himself and ingratiates himself to a community or to, so he's never, ever, ever just there doing stuff. He is doing things that really help other people, and in so doing, he helps himself grow. So it's not exactly like Dragonlance, but you get the point. So there are several times in this where the story just could have totally derailed, and I mean like right off the hillside, exploding, I guess, even though they don't have gasoline in a lot of those cars, as the heroes found themselves in side areas. Now, I'm not a big fan of side areas in a book when here's the setup. We get portaled over to a world because there's a bad guy that's trying to destroy this world, and this world is all that stands between our world and this guy. So in order for him to get to this world where we live, he's got to be stopped here. He's got to break this world apart, destroy it, take it over, do whatever he's going to do before he can move on to ours. And ours is going to be a piece of cake because we don't have any magic. So they get him over here, and they've got to do this thing and stop this cat. Okay? Now, if you have that going on, this is where I say that the focus ought to be staying straight on getting yourself stronger and getting to the bad guy to wipe him out. And there are several spots where they kind of go off rail a little bit and go into like side questy things is the way it feels. Like the Fey realm. They get to the Fey realm, or there's a dwarven domain. There's a dwarven domain where they go to for certain things as well. But the side trips only further to increase the story, surprisingly. Like there's things that happen in those places that help them and the story move along. It helps a lot of things. So the dwarven domain and then Fey, and there's a couple other spots where things like that happen. But the MC Ezekiel opts to become a druid here, who becomes a big ass axe welder, and that's what he likes. He just said, I want a big ass axe. So they give him a big ass axe to kill his foes with. So he's also a kitsune, a fox humanoid. So whenever I heard the title, The Axe Druid, this is what I thought of. Some old dude with a big ass axe, chopping down the bad guys. But that's not what he is. The kitsune is a fox person, or is it kitsune? I watch enough anime, I should know that, but for me, it's just going to be kitsune. So, I would expect him to look like this guy than that, but then, like I said, Ezekiel never meets an NPC he doesn't become friends with almost immediately. He seems to gain a new ability or gear every time he farts, and that is my only real complaint about the book. At times, it seems like Zeke loses his agency. He doesn't do a lot of things to earn things. A lot of times stuff is just kind of handed over to him because it feels like the gods say, well, these are our emissaries. These are the people that we need to fight for us. So help them out as much as you can. And they're not doing as much as they should have, but it doesn't feel like it takes away from the story. But like I say, it just kind of just goes into this, and that's it. He gets a ton of stuff. I mean, and he goes to the Fae, he gets a ton of stuff. And he and his group are going to be emissaries for the Fae, for the dwarves, for the humans of a village. And they do this ritual thing where he gets a nifty lightning axe that I think looks a lot like this axe right here, if you can see that. So there's a lot that happens in each place he goes to. But like I say, the only weak part to the story to me is that Ezekiel and his companions don't really seem to have more agency than they should have. A lot more agency. They should be the ones, cracking down and taking stuff and kicking ass, rather than kind of, hey, you're our guy, so here, we're going to give this to you. And it doesn't feel like well, it does kind of feel like they're just being given things. But it also doesn't take away from the story when they do their fighting. They fight with the items or the spells or whatever it is they learn as efficiently as they can, and as you would hope. There was never one time where I think, oh man, they should be using, I'll just say like a lightning blast would have just solved this whole problem, and he's got lightning blast, but he was using the axe, or he was using this, or he was doing that. But if you really want to know the truth of it, within one book, Ezekiel is given like a massive power axe. He gets one hell of a pet, or a familiar, or whatever you want to call it. Armor, weapons, spells, magic. He is geared to the max, spelled out to the max, and he's still not powerful enough to do what he needs to do. None of his group is. So like when they do go to fight somebody at the end of the book, they very much acknowledge that in spite of everything they have, what they've been given, what they've earned, because they do earn stuff. I don't want to feel like they have no agency whatsoever. They do earn stuff. They still recognize that they can't win with any kind of surety whatsoever. And that's nice. Now for me, the real sin is the book's ending. Now, I understand cliffhangers, and I know I just said in the first review I did for Adapt that I have no problem with them at all, okay? But, in a way, this book, like I say, reminds me a lot of Adapt because the ending made me bite my cheek in frustration, okay? I definitely want book 2 now, and still the almost 15 hours felt like it was half that time. And as off as the ending is for me, I still love the book, the writing, the characters, and especially the entire premise. But I need to say that this does have a cliffhanger ending, but there is a way to do a cliffhanger ending that does not piss off people. Piss off people is like this. Okay, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin are fighting. Green Goblin has Gwen Stacy. He drops Gwen Stacy. Spider-Man webs her. Let's just say he saves her for the sake of argument. Saves her, puts her on the ground, and looks up, and the Green Goblin's gone, and he knows that now the Green Goblin is going to go kill Aunt May. That's the next person on the list. If he can't kill Gwen, he's getting May. That's a cliffhanger. You're like, oh crap, now May's in trouble, and Spidey has to go do this, okay? You don't, under any circumstances, end the book as Gwen falls. That would just be crazy. And this book kind of does that. And it kind of really, really, really upset me a little bit at the end. Because that's not a cliffhanger. That's just like, okay, I'm done writing for the day. I think I'll just end it right here. That's kind of how it felt. Because it was like, okay, I get where Chris Johns was going with it. And like I say, Chris Johns is a really great writer. Really great. But that was not the place to do it. You finish it up after certain things happen. And present another danger. It's like Mortal Kombat. Perfect example. If you've ever seen the movie Mortal Kombat, get over here! Okay? Mortal Kombat, they win the battle, right? They go over, they do the fighting, and they win. Against all odds, Earth wins, and they're free from the Emperor coming. And as they're walking away from the temple, yeah, we kick butt, yeah, all of a sudden the Emperor shows up. No, I'm going to destroy Earth. Well, you're like, oh, shoot. We just stopped this guy, technically. And now we got to go fight him in order to save the Earth. That's a cliffhanger. That's how you do that. The way this was done is not, you understand what I'm saying? Just not happy with it. Could have been done a little bit easier and made it a lot better. But I understand why, Chris. I know what you're going through. I know what you're doing. I see why you want to do things. But it still was just wrong. Man, wrong, brother. Just wrong. Okay. So, as for the narration, I absolutely loved Harrison's voice. His narration skills are off the chart. This is another narrator who has 300 plus books that he's worked on, but I've never heard of. And that's rare. I mean, I'm pretty much up on a lot of narrators. This dude has done over 300 novels, and I think just under 50 fantasy. I don't know. Because I did look him up. And it's like 40 or 50 fantasy novels that he's part of. And I'll give, Mountain Dale credit for like looking around for somebody new and different, other than, and again, I have nothing against our standards, because if it wasn't for our standard narrators, LitRPG wouldn't be where it is right now. Not in the audiobook section, because without Soundbooth, without Parsno, without Rennie, without, I don't want to go through this whole thing, but you've got these amazing people that just knock out of the park every job they do, and they elevate the status of LitRPG all the more for what they do there. And to go outside of that cadre of talent and finding somebody else who's good and actually deserves to be here, it's pretty brave, and it's telling. He keeps me hooked. I will say Harrison kept me hooked on the story, and he had different voices. I think his voices weren't quite as pronounced as they could have been. I think there were a couple times he was a little weak with transitioning between who. I don't think I ever had a problem knowing who was talking, but sometimes it just kind of was like, was that Yosuke or was that Balmer? Or somebody else in the party. So it wasn't hard for me to differentiate, but he could have been a little bit more clear about who was doing what at what time, because I did have to think about it for a second when somebody spoke. With a lot of times, like, if I'm listening to Jeff Hayes do Super Sales, I know exactly who the character is as he's talking. Andrea with the pancakes instantly, even if she's not saying pancakes, or say I can't do it, but you understand. So, Harrison does a really good job. I can't wait to hear more from the guy. I think that book 2 is going to be amazing. I think it's just going to be incredible. So, with that being said, there are some things, like I say, I had issues with. The ending is the primary thing, the lack of agency. So my final score is 8.1 stars. Again, the big issue for me was the ending. And again, I'm pretty forgiving with that sort of stuff, but I was so into this book and so into the story and so into what was happening at the end that the way that it kind of cut just kind of left me a little mad, a little angry. And like I said, I can't wait for book 2. I'm really into book 2. Cannot wait to hear it. And really, it's an awesome story. But I got to knock off points. I got to be honest. I can't just say, hey, it's a great book. Here's 8.5 or 8.6. Can't do that. Can't say it's 8.7 because the ending just was knocked me out really like I'd never get knocked out. So, like I said, it's well worth the time and effort in the book, and it's an incredible book. 8.1 stars is nothing to sneeze at. But like I said, I did have that one issue especially. So give this book a listen. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And having a different kind of MC, not a standard orc or human or elf as the main hero was refreshing. You don't see that very often, especially like a rare humanoid like the Kitsune. Just because you don't see that very often. It was very nice to not have that standard trope thrown at me again and again and again. So give this book a listen. It is well worth it. Next up is my Soundbooth Spotlight. Woohoo! That's right. Soundbooth Spotlight time. Can't go wrong with that. Today, I'm spotlighting Spire, a crafting LitRPG book, which is part of the 100 Kingdoms series, book 1, written by Michael R. Miller of Portal Books, okay? Narrated by Justin Thomas James. Oh, man, JTJ, can we not go wrong here? This is perfect already. Jeff Hayes, yep, and Annie Ellicott. So we've got like 3 major swingers right here. This is like the top 3 lineup of the New York Yankees. Okay, top 3 batters, wham, all home runs. Book length, 12 hours and 20 minutes. And I don't even like the Yankees, guys.
A loud crackle and pop rang in my ears, and then I heard another voice.
Don't go in there.
It was a female voice, sounding so cool and calm it was as if she was announcing the weather. Oh, and I heard it inside my head, so that wasn't worrying at all. I skidded to a stop. What the? Who the?
They can see you. You'll be trapped. Go to the dungeons.
There's something about running for your life that makes you trust voices you hear in your head. Only I didn't know the way, and I turned first left and then right like an idiot.
Right.
The voice, told me. I went right. I let the voice guide me through the maze of the hallways and rooms, all the while hearing the terrorists who were now hot on my heels. The natural light vanished as I descended deeper into the bowels of the spire. Torches held in sconces on grimy walls did little to help, so in desperation, I brought out my own lantern.
So, just for your own edification, as I said, I don't like the Yankees. I don't watch sports. I just don't have time, and I could care less who throws a football or a baseball or a soccer ball or whatever it is in the air. But if it came down to it, I was born and raised in a very specific area that if I said anything but Pittsburgh, my father would kill me. So if you've got to ask me who I would root for, it's always going to be Pittsburgh, whether it's the Pens, Pirates, Steelers, the Maulers, whoever it would be, I would tell you it'd be the Penguins. Did I say Penguins by accident? Maybe I like hockey a little bit. But anyway, because they're not throwing balls. But Pittsburgh is my hometown team. Okay. So, all right, you crazy cats and chicks. Let me just say, I have to say that this is one fun Soundbooth spotlight tonight. My first thought was, how in the hell can you carry a story on crafting? Okay, honestly. That's pretty big shoulders to kind of cover up with some cloth. Because crafting is not something I would say can be done interestingly for a prolonged or sustained period of time. Especially when you have a cover that makes it look like the story is about like when 007 kind of gets mashed up with Assassin's Creed. Because that's what the cover looks like to me. It's like Assassin's Creed meets James Bond or Spider-Man or something. And it makes it look really badass. So that cover just makes you want to see the story more. I don't know, how it's going to go from the cover, but it makes me want to watch. It makes me want to listen. So all I can say is I needn't have worried. The book is full of crunch. So for you diehard lit RPGers, it will satisfy you on that front. I mean, it's got a lot of crisp and crack and crunch. It also has a new class that's really cool called the Scavenger, which brings back fond memories of a great Deadlands game. I don't know if you ever heard of Deadlands RPG. I'm a big RPGer from way back when. I've got tons of RPGs in my house that I wish I could play, but my kids, I tried to get them into D&D, and they just had no interest. They were bored out of their mind because it didn't go like this on a phone, and so they're done. So I have no one to play games with anymore. Not that I have time for it, but I'm an RPG guy. So Deadlands was one of my favorite games. It was a Western game about ghost rock and how if you burned it, it would do all kinds of crazy things, but it also released evil spirits into the world. And specifically, that all led to another RPG book in the same vein of Deadlands called Deadlands Hell on Earth, which was kind of like Mad Max meets the Wild West after an apocalypse. And there was a character there that kind of reminded me of the Scavenger. See, I go a long way around to get to a point. And there they weren't called Scavengers, they were called Junkers. Same difference. Still, the point is it made a class that nobody ever wanted, and everybody knows is super weak, that proves to be probably the best choice the MC in this particular instance, Jack, can make. They can take things and make things out of them, upgrade and improve, and they can kind of like use other classes' powers to a certain extent. So it's really a neat little concept that it gets played out very differently than what you're used to. So I enjoyed that a lot. And believe me, Jack milks every advantage that he can from this class, just like you should, making weapons and upgrading them to insane levels. And he uses his powers to a degree that no other scavenger should be able to do because of certain events in the game. So this isn't a need to nerf situation, because you would say, well, if this character got played by hundreds of people or thousands of people, they'd be nerfing it. It's only because of the situation that he finds himself in that it feels like it's a nerfable situation. And he rapidly levels because of things that go on. Now, this book does take on a diehard feel when the game is basically taken over by a terrorist who seeks liberation for his brothers in arms around the world, such as members of the Asian Dawn. Wait, that's Die Hard. I hate when I do that. In that vein, let's just say the bad guy wants what the bad guy wants isn't really obvious at first, just as in the Nakatomi heist was really about stealing negotiable bearer bonds. The baddie here is playing a hide and seek with his true objective. So it definitely has, excuse me, a powerful Die Hard feel. Die Hard, and I would even say a little bit of a Home Alone kind of tinge thrown into it, because there's a lot of points where Jack is fighting bad guys and he's got to do things that make you go, oh, this is like Harry and what's his name from Home Alone getting their asses bashed around by one little wimpy kid. So, it's kind of Home Alone, Die Hard, but you get the idea. In spite of, or maybe in due to its similarity of Die Hard, the book is a real adrenaline boost, and you sympathize with the MC, who is trapped in the game along with everybody else, but with some serious implications if he can't halt the siege of the terroristic group. There is a timer on this, so they know that the trapped in the game trope isn't really all that problematic for 99% of the people playing the game. Jack, that's a whole different story. Jack really needs to get out of the game. He is on a timer just as much as the terrorists are. And he's got to get himself out before certain things happen. And you have to ask, is he going to find a way out and abandon everybody, or is he going to stick around? Well, if you've ever read a book, I don't have to tell you anything else about it. He goes home, of course, first chance he gets. So, I didn't mean to spoil that for you. Anyway, the bad guy here isn't as nasty as Hans Gruber. Like when he's counting down, but I tell you, I don't know anything. I can't do anything. You're just going to have to shoot me. Okay, pow. That's Hans Gruber. The terrorist here, he makes a lot of braggadocious threats, but he doesn't really do a lot to carry out on. He's really trying to just scare people and that's a nice difference too. But he is just nasty enough to do what he says he will do. He tries to give everybody an out, and when they don't take it, well, too bad for them. That's all he can say. He's got no sympathy, especially if they kill themselves trying to stop him. That's on them, not on him. So, watching Jack and the terrorist kind of butt heads is very fun. The only issue that you might have is that it definitely feels like you've read this book before, or at least in the beginning. However, as the story moves on and ahead, you really get going, and you can see that this is a standalone kind of novel. My only concern, and I'm going to say this again, is it feels like a standalone kind of novel. To me, it feels more like a one-shot book than it is a series. Now, I'll grant you, the ending of the book leaves things open that there could be more books in the series. But, the book is called 100 Kingdoms. So I'm guessing, that this is a full-blown series. But I can see this being a book completely unto itself. It's very self-contained, and everything is pretty much completed and wrapped up by the end. And if it isn't going to become a full-blown series, then I'm excited to where Miller takes us next. If it is, I should say, if it is going to be a full-blown series, because he's got the 100 worlds out there that he can look into, I suppose. But there's nothing about this novel that leaves threads other than what you find out about what the terrorist was after. And once you get that and you kind of see things, you'll realize that the story is pretty much told. It's pretty much told, but there is wiggle room for more stories to come. So I can handle this being a one shot or in a series. But like I say, you won't feel like, hey, there's a cliffhanger or there's plot threads that aren't answered. None of that occurs here. This is a very tight, succinct story. And I like that a lot because, that's how I think a story should be. I think book one should be like, here's the story. It takes us to a certain point and it leaves a string that you can pull to take you over to book two. You don't have to have this great big cliffhanger or something like that. You can just say, okay, here's everything that happened. And now that our character has gotten to this point, we're going to see where he takes us with this kind of stuff in mind. And that's what's there at the end. like I say, the book is fun, but it's wonderfully written as a self-contained novel, and that was probably like my biggest draw to it. As I finished the book, I was like, wow, you don't see this very often, because I don't feel like I've got to read another eight books in the series to get a sense of completion, or something like that. This feels very satisfactory to me, the way it ends. And if it does have more, great, because I really do suspect that Miller will do the same thing in book 2 and book 3. He'll tell a story and wrap it up, put a pin in it, and then lead over in a small way to what could happen in the next book. So pretty smart, pretty slick, very fun. Now, what can I say about Soundbooth? What can't I say about Soundbooth? I can't say I don't like them, because I love the guys. This is a terrific trio. Wait. See, my mouth talks before I speak. The trio of terrific tones takes this tale and twists it into a torrent of tunes to tickle your ears. Yeah, I love to alliterate. See, that's better. My mouth started going and I couldn't say it. But try saying that like 4 times real fast. Seriously, though, the Soundbooth gang really have fun with this story. You can almost hear the smile in Jeff's face as he performs, and he just loves what he does so much and easily exudes evil for some bizarre reason. Jeff, you worry me sometimes, brother, because you get to play these bad guys. Like, you're in Harmon Cooper's Cherry Blossom Girls playing the bad guy, and then, you've been playing the bad guy in a couple other things like Shadow Sun. I've heard you doing voices and here, and you're scaring me with these bad guys, because that seems to be like your go-to thing now. I think you want to be the next Hans Gruber. Yeah, I think that's the case. But like I say, he just exudes evil here. I mean, pretty well. I mean, it's just villainy galore. Annie brings the bang for our buck as she nails down the role of the shifty AI and sounds perfectly glitchy in all the right spots. And damn, can I just say that JTJ brings home the Canadian bacon on this book. Justin Thomas James, the man's mellow tones, totally reminds me of WKRP's in Cincinnati's Venus Flytrap, only with double the cool and triple the smooth. The man's like bourbon in the ears. Well, I should say for the ears, because if you pour bourbon in your ear, it's just going to make things hard to hear. He's like bourbon for the ears, yeah. So, SBT all the way, my pretty babies. These people really bring together a book. It's phenomenal. And again, I don't have any issues with anything they do 99% of the time. And this is one of those times I have no problems with what they do. My final score is 8.2 stars. I like the Home Alone vibe. Jack didn't do that, by the way. But it did start a little slow and treaded some seriously familiar paths before it finally took off. So, a little bit of a lower score than what it could have been. But it's still one hell of a read. It's very fun. And like I say, it sews up everything very neatly at the end. And I appreciate that. So 8.2 stars. So this segment is finally, what else have they done? But I'm doing a very special what else have they done, because it's only about a short story. This one is Deus Ex Rand, Misfits, Demigods, and a Beer-Drinking Dog, written by D.J. Bodden, narrated by Daniel Penz, with a book length of only 18 minutes.
Remember microwavable popcorn? Some of the old-timers know what I'm talking about. Before the collapse made tech as unreliable as magic was before the collapse, we had these boxes that cook things with waves. Crazy shit. Anyway, that pop every couple of seconds when the bag was just starting is what a normal day during the collapse was like. Pop. Yee-haw! That was Tex, my team's self-appointed sharpshooter. Tex was so nearsighted she had to tie her boots by feel. She broke her glasses between the time when DC went up and when Puddle found us, so we gave her the scope from his rifle. It's just the kind of guy Puddle was. With the lenses set just right, Tex could see and shoot pretty good. Though we had to have a talk about trigger safety when she started looking at everyone through it and Lefty lost an ear.
This is a segment I haven't done for a while, and I figured that since I was reviewing the Firebrand book, I might as well just throw a bone to the other writers of the VGO side quest people. And please show the book here. That would include DJ Bodden. Now, as you know, I am one of those people who adore short stories. I write some of them. Sometimes they get published, sometimes they don't. But I like short stories. I love reading short stories. I like a short story because it is very quick and succinct and makes a very powerful statement. And that's one of the great things about a short story is just how much impactful it can be if it's done properly. It can be fun. It can be horrifying. It can be amazing. Whatever it is that guy that's writing it or that girl that's writing it is going for, there is a message that is there. And that's why if you ever have seen any of my reviews of some collections that people put together from short stories they've done, I'll say, yeah, the story was okay. It was about a werewolf, but there was no point to it. It was just about a werewolf attack that was in the desert. I won't tell you whose that was, but that's it. There's really nothing else to it. I want to see like a reason why there's a werewolf in the Iraqi desert and what happens and what is there's a message. There has to be a little bit more than this group of soldiers show up, they get slaughtered, and that's the end of the story. That's not a very good story. That's just an incident. I need something with some meat to it. And that's a good short story. Something that has a point. There's something that's it's either horrifying or it's amazing. And this one is fun. This is a very fun one. So, as I say, I'm always looking for a good shorty. I don't mean that kind of shorty. No. Although she is a gamer. Well, maybe that kind. Maybe that kind of shorty. She's still there. Yeah, I could go for that. Save that for me for later, please, Ramon. No, I'm talking about short stories, not shorties. But, these brief little tales, and I think Bodden has actually set up an entire post-apocalyptic world in under 20 minutes here. One that is dashed with action and humor and just fun. There's a lot of silliness, but at the same time, it's pretty serious. There's a big battle going on. But he manages to give you a layout of what happened to the world, why it's the way it is, who the group of people are that are fighting, why they're fighting, and what the results are. That's pretty good. And in under 20 minutes, he did those 5 things. Okay? That's pretty powerful. Now, the book features a motley crew of unexpected heroes, dead people, demigods, horsemen, as in the horsemen of the apocalypse, I guess, and a ton of other craziness that is just pure high adrenaline and even high octane fun. Really, it was just a pleasure to listen to. The narration is good, and Pens is spot on injecting the humor into a scene. This is the only story that I know of that entails a group of warriors battling for their lives against one of the horsemen of the apocalypse that also features a beer-drinking dog. You can see dogs do drink beer. Right there. I'll grant you, getting a dog to drink beer isn't really all that hard. I used to have a Alaskan Malamute that I would let drink Pepsi. I'd just come out and give her some Pepsi in her bowl, and she just loved me to death for doing that. So, teaching a dog to drink beer, not so hard. It's teaching them how to light a cigarette that's damn near impossible. So, yeah, Pens tells the story very well. And I enjoyed him and his weaving of the tale very much. It was an immense joy to listen to him do this. He had a lot of fun. You can tell he was enjoying the story as much as I was, and that's very important. Now, here I'm just going to say it like this. There's no score here. I'm just putting this out for you to go check out. It's just a brief review. I wanted you to let you know it's fun, it's exciting, it has. I can't go into a lot of detail because I'll tell you the whole story in under 10 minutes. And that's just in a recap because it's a 15-minute story, basically. So the one thing I will say is I don't recommend using a credit on an 18-minute story. As much as I like this story and DJ Bodden, it's not worth a credit. Just pay the couple bucks. If you really, really wanted to hear a good story, it's entertaining, it's only a few dollars to pick up. That's what I did. It was no big deal. A few dollars here for a quick short story. It was a fun short story. And like I say, it makes you feel like there's a bigger world out there, a bigger book that should exist by this point. DJ, are you listening? So it's a good setup for another another series if he ever wanted to do something with it. So I look at it as a good investment because this is something that he is writing. He's written for VGO. He's written this. So, support him, and maybe he'll do some other things with other companies or for himself. And that's what it's all about, is supporting the community. But I can totally see this fleshed out in a bigger, badder-ass story than what we have right here. And this is a really good, big, badass story for as small as it is. So check it out, guys. I really like the story. And like I say, it's just supporting somebody in the community for a short story that doesn't cost much. What can I say? That's the show for this week. Like I say, next week will be the Dungeon Special, probably part 1. And then it'll be followed by another regular episode, which will probably feature something by a guy named Dave Wilmarth, Shadow Sun Survival, something or other, which, man, it's amazing. I just love that story. But I'm going to get that in there and get Dungeon Specials 1 and 2 completed and up and running for y'all. So keep an eye out for that. But I do want to say thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch this show. If you want to support us, please like the LitRPG Podcast Facebook page or the YouTube page, or even just like and share the video. I'm going to ask for more suggestions for any kind of segment you like what else have they done? Is it lit? Game worlds. I've got a couple game worlds that I probably should do. I might do one for the Dungeon Special just because. But anyway, I would like some suggestions so that I can get some other books that you folks think deserve to be recognized. Like I say, I try to do authors or narrators who have really good stories out there that aren't part of the lit stories for, like, Is It Lit? But I don't know about them. Like I said, I just found DJ Bawden's short story by pure accident. I don't even know how I found it. I was looking through something on Audible, and there it popped up, and I thought, well, hell's bells, I'll give this a listen. And it was really good, and I enjoyed it. And it was nice, and it made me go back and do another what else have they done segment. And I could do that for Is It Lit? Or, any of the other different segments that I do. Raise picks, I got easy ones I could do for that. I blather on about stuff all the time. And so please send me suggestions. I am really, really open and needing some ideas. Please leave comments or suggestions in the comment section below. And feel free to tell me whatever you like. I always enjoy the feedback. I am very happy to hear from you guys. I like your ideas and comments, and you're right. I'm not always right, or at least my opinion may not mesh well with yours, and I can defend myself, or at least explain why I feel the way I do about certain things. You may think that, like, the prequel book for Firebrand wasn't what you expected because it was a prequel, and I'm going to say why I liked it because here. So, come at me. I'm going to take you on. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I do like to have that discourse. I think it's very valuable, and it helps me kind of hone my edge as a reviewer, because I try to be very fair when I review. And there's very few times, like I say, that I feel like a book isn't deserving of a good score, if it's done right. And like I said, I have criteria I follow. And like you say, with like Gang But Not Conquered, you get 3 stars just because you followed 1, 2, and 3 parts of this. Everything else was just crap and I didn't like it. So that's where I go. And getting your opinions, you can come back and say, hey, I like Gang But Not Conquered, and here's why. And I can go back and say, okay, I might have messed up on that, or I totally agree with your point of view. And I'm happy to not change my score, but I'll reassess how I do the next book of somebody else's and say, okay, I missed out on this aspect. Come at me, and I'll make those changes. I'm happy to adapt, which leads me back to Jay Boyce. So, with that being said, that is the end of the show. As always, I am Ray for the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. Keep listening, and remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes. There's a whole bunch of them tune thingamabobs. So go out and play a tune, or get a tune, or listen to a tune. But just keep listening, guys, because it's well worth it.